Before Amazon, before Walmart, before the internet, one company sold Americans everything. But then, it vanished. Let's picture this for a second. Imagine in 1969, Neil Armstrong is about to walk on the moon. The Beatles just released Abbey Road. And in living rooms across America, families are flipping through a catalog that weighs more than a newborn baby. That's the Sears catalog. It wasn't just a catalog. You could buy a washing machine, a wedding dress, a guitar, and an entire house. Yes, an actual house, all from the same book. Sears wasn't just a store. It was the American dream, bound in paper and delivered to your doorstep. At its peak, Sears wasn't just big. It was unimaginable. Statistics has it that 1 out of every 2 Americans shopped there, half the country. Sears was worth more than Amazon, Walmart, and Target combined today, adjusted for inflation. It created more millionaires than the California gold rush. But then, it died. Not slowly, not gracefully, it collapsed like a building imploded from within. By 2018, this titan that once defined American retail was bankrupt, gone, erased from the landscape as if it never existed. Here's the thing everyone gets wrong about Sears. They didn't lose to Amazon. They didn't lose to Walmart. The truth is far more interesting and far more disturbing, because Sears had everything it needed to win. They invented online shopping before the internet existed. They had the logistics, the customer trust, the data, the money. So what happened? The answer isn't what you think. And the lesson isn't just about retail. It's about how empires fall, how leaders fail, and how the biggest threat to any company isn't the competition outside. It's the decisions made inside. This is the story of how Sears went from dominating America to vanishing into nothing. And by the end, you'll realize this isn't just Sears' story. It's happening right now to companies you think are invincible. Let's go back to where it all began. The year is 1886. Grover Cleveland is president. America is changing fast, but if you lived anywhere outside a major city, you were stuck in the past. No electricity, no cars, and if you wanted to buy something, you had exactly one choice: the local general store. That store owner had you by the throat. He knew it. You knew it. If he wanted to charge triple for a hammer, what were you going to do? Drive to the next town in your wagon for 2 days. Enter Richard Warren Sears, a railroad station agent in Minnesota. 23 years old, ambitious, and about to stumble into an opportunity that would change America forever. A local jeweler refused a shipment of watches. They were just sitting there. Sears bought them, sold them to other station agents up and down the railroad line, and made more money in 6 months than he'd make in years as a station agent. His brain exploded with possibility. If he could sell watches by mail, why not everything else? But here's where Sears showed the first glimpse of genius. He didn't just sell stuff cheaper than local stores. He understood something profound about human psychology. People don't just want things. They want to feel something when they buy. The Sears catalog wasn't a price list. It was entertainment. It was hope. It was poetry written in product descriptions. Sears would write about a simple jacket like it was the key to becoming a new person. Women's dresses weren't just clothes. They were your ticket to elegance, to respect, to the life you deserved. And it worked. Boy, did it work. By 1895, the Sears catalog was 532 pages. By 1908, it was over 1,000 pages and reached millions of American homes. Rural families would gather around it like it was a television. Kids would circle items they dreamed about. Parents would plan purchases months in advance. But Sears understood something deeper, something that Amazon would later rediscover: trust is everything. In 1900, Americans didn't trust mail-order companies. You send money to some guy in Chicago, and then what? Maybe you get your product. Maybe you get nothing. It was basically a coin flip. Sears made a radical promise: satisfaction guaranteed or your money back. No questions asked. This was revolutionary, insane, even. His investors thought he was crazy, but Sears knew that one policy would change everything. And it did. That policy created something more valuable than money: trust. Once people knew they wouldn't get cheated, the floodgates opened. Then Sears pulled off his master stroke. They sold houses. Actual houses, kit houses, everything you needed to build a complete home, shipped to you by railroad. Between 1908 and 1940, Sears sold over 70,000 houses. 70,000. Some of those houses are still standing today, probably worth more than the company that sold them. Think about the ambition, the logistics, the audacity. This wasn't just retail, this was reimagining how Americans could live. By the 1920s, Sears, Roebuck and Company was the Amazon of its age, except bigger, way bigger, relatively speaking. They had perfected the supply chain, mastered the catalog, owned the customer relationship. They were printing money. But Richard Sears had a problem. He was a brilliant marketer and a terrible manager. The company was chaos behind the scenes. In 1908, he was pushed out of his own company. He died 6 years later, never seeing the empire he built reach its true peak. Because what came next was even bigger. If Richard Sears built the foundation, the man who came next built the skyscraper, General Robert Wood. Wood joined Sears in 1924 and saw something everyone else missed. America was changing again. The car was taking over. Roads were being built everywhere. Rural families weren't isolated anymore. They could drive to town. The catalog was still huge, but Wood asked a dangerous question: what if we built stores? The Sears board thought he was insane. "We're a catalog company," they said. "That's our strength. Why would we mess with success?" Wood didn't listen. In 1925, Sears opened 8 retail stores. By 1929, they had 319. By the 1950s, Sears stores were everywhere, and the company was absolutely printing money. They weren't just selling products anymore. They were selling the American lifestyle. Here's what made Sears different from every other store: they controlled everything. You didn't just shop at Sears, you lived Sears. Your appliances, Kenmore brand made by other companies but sold exclusively at Sears. Your tools, Craftsman guaranteed for life, swap it if it breaks, no questions. Your car battery, Die Hard wasn't just marketing, it was a promise. Your tires, Sears. Your lawn mower, Sears. Your clothes, Sears. Your kids' school supplies, Sears. These weren't just products, they were good products. Craftsman tools were genuinely excellent. Kenmore appliances were reliable workhorses. Die Hard batteries actually lasted. Sears had figured out the secret. If you control quality, you control trust. And if you control trust, you control the market. But it went deeper. Sears became America's banker for regular people. In 1911, Sears introduced credit. This was before most Americans had access to consumer credit, before credit cards. If you wanted to buy something expensive, you paid cash or you didn't buy it. Sears said, "Buy now, pay later." They weren't just selling you a washing machine. They were giving you the ability to afford a washing machine. For millions of American families climbing into the middle class, Sears made modern life possible. By the 1950s and 60s, Sears was at the absolute pinnacle. They were the largest retailer in the world. They sold 1% of everything bought in America. 1% of the entire economy flowed through Sears. That's like if Amazon sold twice what it sells today, adjusted for the economy size. The Sears Tower in Chicago, now called Willis Tower, was built in 1973 as the tallest building in the world. That wasn't just a building. That was a statement. We are the peak of American capitalism. But here's the thing about peaks. There's only one direction left to go. The cracks were already forming. They were small at first, barely noticeable, but they were there. By the 1970s, competition was emerging. Walmart was opening stores in small towns, beating Sears on price. Kmart was doing the same. Specialty stores were popping up, stores that sold only sporting goods, only electronics, only home improvement. They couldn't compete with Sears on breadth, but they didn't need to. They just needed to be better at one thing. Sears had another problem: real estate. By the 1970s, shopping malls were exploding across America. Sears had built its stores as standalone destinations in downtown areas. Now people wanted to shop at malls. Sears had to adapt, which meant expensive new stores in expensive mall locations. But the real problem was internal. Sears had become fat and slow, bureaucratic. They had 500,000 employees, multiple layers of management, decision-making that took months. They were still making money, huge money, but the culture was changing. Innovation slowed. That hungry, ambitious spirit that built the company was replaced by comfortable executives protecting their territory. If you wanted to try something new at Sears, you had to convince 17 people, fill out 43 forms, and wait 6 months for approval. Still, in 1980, nobody was worried. Sears was invincible. They had 894 stores, revenues were still climbing, the stock price was strong, everything looked fine. But underneath, the rot was spreading. The 1980s should have been Sears' wake-up call. Instead, it was the beginning of the end. In 1981, Sears made a decision that, in hindsight, reveals everything wrong with the company. They bought Dean Witter Reynolds, a stock brokerage, and Coldwell Banker, a real estate company. Why? Because some Harvard MBAs convinced Sears executives they should become a financial supermarket. You'd come to Sears to buy a refrigerator, get a stock tip, and buy a house all in one place. Read that again, a financial supermarket. This was the beginning of the end, and nobody realized it. Here's what was really happening. Sears executives had fallen in love with financial engineering. Making money from money was sexier than selling washing machines. Real estate and financial services had better margins than retail. On paper, it made sense. In reality, it was a disaster. Sears didn't understand finance. Their retail expertise meant nothing in stock trading. Customers didn't want to buy stocks where they bought socks. It was confusing, unfocused, and expensive. But worse, it sent a message through the company: retail isn't our future. We're embarrassed by our core business. We are chasing something shinier. While Sears executives were playing banker, something huge was happening that they completely missed. Sam Walton was building Walmart into a monster. Walmart understood something Sears had forgotten: efficiency matters. Walmart squeezed every penny out of their supply chain. They built sophisticated systems to track inventory, analyze sales data, and optimize everything. They were obsessed with costs. Every decision was about getting cheaper and passing those savings to customers. Sears, meanwhile, was bloated. Their supply chain was old. Their stores were expensive to run. Their prices were higher. They still had quality and brands going for them, but the gap was closing. Then in 1985, Sears made another catastrophic decision. They launched Prodigy, an online service. Wait, stop, let's sit with this for a moment. In 1985, 11 years before Amazon sold its first book online, Sears launched an online service. They had the technology, the infrastructure, the customer base, and the catalog expertise to dominate online shopping before it was even called online shopping. They had email before Gmail. They had online shopping before Amazon. They had everything they needed to own the future. And they killed it. Well, they didn't kill it immediately, but they treated it like a side project, a toy, something the nerds in the basement were playing with while the real business, retail stores, and financial services continued. Sears could have been Amazon. They should have been Amazon. They had a 15-year head start on Amazon. Let that sink in. But here's the thing, innovation wasn't the problem. Sears had innovation. The problem was that nobody in power believed in it. Nobody fought for it. Nobody was willing to bet the company on the future. By the 1990s, the problems were obvious to everyone. Walmart had surpassed Sears as America's largest retailer. Target was eating their lunch in the middle-class market. Home Depot and Lowe's were destroying their hardware and appliance business. Best Buy was taking their electronics customers. Sears was being attacked from every direction, and their response was nothing. Well, not nothing. They tried various things. They closed stores. They remodeled stores. They changed marketing strategies. they brought in new executives. But here's what they didn't do. They didn't fundamentally reimagine what Sears should be. They kept trying to be the old Sears in a world where the old Sears didn't make sense anymore. The 1990s became a slow-motion car crash, sales declining, profits shrinking, store closures accelerating. The company was still huge. They had over 850 stores and 300,000 employees, but the trajectory was clear. And then, in 2005, something happened that everyone thought would save Sears. Instead, it guaranteed their destruction. His name was Eddie Lampert, and he was a hedge fund manager who thought he was a genius. Actually, strike that, he was a hedge fund manager who was a genius at making money in finance. He just knew absolutely nothing about retail. In 2005, Lampert orchestrated a merger between Sears and Kmart, another dying retailer, creating Sears Holdings Corporation. He became chairman and later CEO. Wall Street loved it. Here was a brilliant financial mind who was going to turn around two struggling retailers with tough love and smart management. He was compared to Warren Buffett. People called him a visionary. He was going to extract value from Sears' real estate, optimize the business, cut waste, and return the company to greatness. Instead, he destroyed it. Here's what Lampert believed. Stores should compete with each other internally. If the appliance department wants more resources, they should have to outcompete the clothing department for funding. Let the market decide. The strong will survive, the weak will die, and the company will be stronger. This is called internal competition, and in a hedge fund, it might make sense. In a retail company, it's corporate suicide. Suddenly, departments within the same Sears store were enemies. The appliance manager wouldn't help the tool manager because they were competing for the same budget. The clothing department wouldn't coordinate with the electronics department. Everyone was trying to prove their department deserved resources while everyone else should be cut. Stores stopped feeling like coherent experiences. They felt like chaos because they were chaos. But it got worse. Lampert didn't believe in investing in stores. He saw retail stores as dying assets, so he stopped renovating, stopped maintenance, stopped everything that required spending money. If you walked into a Sears in 2010, you'd see cracked floors, burned-out lights, empty shelves, and exhausted employees. It looked like a store going out of business, because it was. Lampert had a theory. Sears' real value was in their brands, Craftsman, Kenmore, Die Hard, and their real estate. The stores themselves were just costly overhead. So his plan was to extract value from the brands and real estate while the retail business slowly died. He started selling the best assets. Craftsman tools, the crown jewel, the brand that defined Sears, sold to Stanley Black & Decker for nearly $1 billion. Die Hard batteries sold. Kenmore appliances licensed out. The real estate sold off piece by piece. Here's the thing. This made sense if your goal was to extract maximum short-term value for shareholders. It made sense if you viewed Sears as a dying patient and you were harvesting organs. But it made zero sense if you wanted Sears to survive. Employees were demoralized. They watched their company being dismantled piece by piece. Store conditions deteriorated. Customers stopped coming because why would you shop at a store that feels like it's closing? Meanwhile, Amazon was rising. By 2015, Amazon was crushing everybody, not just Sears, everybody. But Sears was especially vulnerable because they'd stopped investing years ago. Remember that online service Sears had in 1985. By 2010, Sears' website was a joke. It was slow, ugly, and barely functional. They were being beaten by companies that didn't exist when Sears had the technology to dominate online retail. The death spiral accelerated. Fewer customers meant less revenue. Less revenue meant more store closures. More store closures meant fewer customers. Lampert kept selling assets to keep the company alive, but he was just prolonging the inevitable. By 2017, Sears was closing 150 stores per year. The company that once had over 3,500 stores was down to a few hundred. The stock price had collapsed from over $140 per share to single digits. Employees hadn't gotten raises in years. Stores looked abandoned. The inventory was terrible, half-empty shelves with random products nobody wanted. The Sears appliance department, once the gold standard, was being beaten by Home Depot, Lowe's, and even Amazon. On October 15, 2018, Sears Holdings filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The company that once sold everything to everyone had assets worth less than a single Costco store. The bankruptcy process was brutal. More stores closed. More people lost jobs. Vendors who'd worked with Sears for decades lost money. Technically, Sears still exists today. There are a handful of stores still open, operated under a new company called Transformco, which Lampert bought out of bankruptcy. But they're zombies. Everyone knows it. The Sears that mattered died in 2018. So what happened? How did the largest, most dominant retailer in American history simply vanish? Here's where we need to get real, because the easy answer is wrong. The easy answer is Amazon killed Sears, online shopping destroyed retail, Walmart beat them on price. That's all true, but it's not the truth. Because here's the thing, Sears had everything they needed to beat all of them. Sears invented catalog shopping. They understood remote retail better than anyone. They should have dominated online shopping. They had the infrastructure. They had the fulfillment centers. They had the customer lists. They had the brand trust. They had the technology before Amazon existed. Sears understood logistics better than almost anyone. They'd been shipping products across America for over a century. Amazon had to build that from scratch. Sears already had it. Sears had customer data before big data was even a concept. They knew what Americans bought when they bought it and how much they'd pay. That data was worth billions. They did nothing with it. So what really killed Sears? Let me tell you what really happened, and this is the part that should terrify everyone watching. Sears committed suicide, slowly, then quickly. The real killer wasn't Amazon or Walmart. It was a series of decisions made by leaders who fundamentally misunderstood their own business. Mistake 1, they stopped believing in retail. Somewhere in the 1980s, Sears executives became embarrassed by retail. Selling refrigerators wasn't sexy. Financial services were sexy. Real estate was sexy. So they chased sexy and they neglected the business that made them great. When your leaders don't believe in your core business, you're already dead. You just don't know it yet. Mistake 2, they prioritized short-term profits over long-term survival. Every decision became about this quarter's numbers. Cutting investment made the profits look better this quarter. Closing stores made the balance sheet look better this year. Selling off brands generated cash now. But it guaranteed death later, and everyone knew it. They just didn't care because later was someone else's problem. Mistake 3, they stopped listening to customers. Somewhere along the way, Sears forgot that retail is about serving customers. It became about serving shareholders, serving executives, serving everyone except the people who actually bought stuff. Customers were telling Sears what they wanted: better stores, better prices, better service, better online experience. Sears ignored all of it. Mistake 4, they hired the wrong leader at the worst time. Eddie Lampert was brilliant at finance and terrible at retail. He treated Sears like a financial asset to be optimized, not a living business serving real people. He believed in theories over reality. He believed in data over people. He believed in internal competition over collaboration. And he destroyed the company. But here's the controversial part. Lampert wasn't the problem. He was a symptom. The board hired him. The shareholders supported him. The investment community praised him. Everyone saw Sears as an asset to be monetized, not a business to be revived. And that's the real lesson. When everyone involved sees a company as nothing more than a stock price, that company is already dead. Mistake 5, they forgot what they were. This is the big one, the existential one. At some point, Sears forgot what made them special. They weren't just a store, they were a promise. They were the democratization of quality goods. They were the company that gave average Americans access to middle-class life. They were the business that said, "We'll treat you fairly, guarantee our products, and help you build a better life." That promise was worth more than all their real estate combined. That promise was the entire brand, and they abandoned it. When stores became dirty and neglected, they broke the promise. When they sold off Craftsman and Kenmore, they broke the promise. When they stopped investing in employees, they broke the promise. And once the promise was broken, there was nothing left, just buildings and debt. So what can we learn from the death of Sears? Because this isn't just history. This is happening right now to companies that seem invincible. Lesson 1. Dominance is temporary. Sears dominated American retail for nearly a century. They were too big to fail. They were invincible, and then they weren't. Right now, there are companies that seem unstoppable. Amazon, Apple, Google, Walmart. They won't last forever either. Nothing does. The only question is what kills them: competition from outside or stupidity from inside. Lesson 2. Your biggest advantage can become your biggest weakness. Sears' massive store network was their advantage until it became an anchor. Their catalog expertise was revolutionary until it made them too slow to adapt to the internet. Their diversification into financial services seemed smart until it distracted them from retail. Success creates habits, and habits create blindness. The things that made you successful yesterday are often exactly what prevents you from seeing what you need to do tomorrow. Lesson 3. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Sears had strategies, lots of them, new store formats, new marketing campaigns, new initiatives. None of it mattered because the culture was broken. When your culture becomes bureaucratic, political, and focused on internal competition rather than serving customers, no strategy will save you. Culture is everything, and culture comes from leadership. Lesson 4. You can't cut your way to growth. Lampert tried to save Sears by cutting everything: cut staff, cut maintenance, cut investment, cut, and every cut made the company weaker. You can't save a retail business by making the experience worse. You can't win by offering less. You can't grow by shrinking. At some point, you have to invest in being better or you die. Lesson 5. The customer is the business. This sounds obvious, but watch how many companies forget it. They start optimizing for everything except customer experience. They focus on stock prices, quarterly earnings, efficiency metrics, competitor moves. But here's the truth. If customers love you, everything else works itself out. If customers don't love you, nothing else matters. Sears stopped focusing on customers decades before they died, and once that happened, the end was inevitable. Lesson 6. Leadership matters more than anything. Sears had everything they needed to win: money, infrastructure, brand, customer loyalty, data, technology, everything. And they lost it all because of bad leadership. Leaders who didn't believe in the business. Leaders who prioritized short-term gains over long-term health. Leaders who hired the wrong people. Leaders who lost sight of what mattered. Great leadership can save a struggling company. Bad leadership can destroy a dominant one. It's that simple. So here we are. Sears is gone. Not completely. There are still a few zombie stores stumbling around, but effectively gone. The Sears that mattered, the Sears that dominated America, the Sears that defined retail for generations. That Sears is dead. But here's what keeps me up at night. This is happening again, right now, to companies you think are invincible. Look at the patterns. Look at how Sears executives became disconnected from their business. Look at how they chased short-term profits. Look at how they stopped investing in the core business. Look at how they forgot about customers. Now look at some of today's dominant companies. Really look. How many are showing the same symptoms? How many have leaders who seem more interested in stock prices than products? How many are cutting investment to boost quarterly earnings? How many have become bureaucratic and slow? How many have forgotten why customers loved them in the first place? The truth is, Sears' story isn't unique. It's a pattern that repeats throughout business history. Dominant companies get complacent, they get distracted, they lose focus, they prioritize everything except what made them great, and then they die. The scary part isn't that it happened to Sears. The scary part is how predictable it was. Everyone could see it happening. Employees knew, customers knew, industry experts knew, even some executives knew. But nobody stopped it, because stopping it would have required admitting they were wrong. It would have required making hard choices. It would have required prioritizing long-term survival over short-term comfort. And people rarely do that, especially when things still look okay on the surface. So here's my controversial take. Sears didn't die because of Amazon. They didn't die because of Walmart. They didn't even die because of bad luck or changing markets. Sears died because the people running it chose to let it die. Maybe not consciously, maybe not intentionally, but through 1,000 small decisions that prioritized everything except building a company that would last. And that's the most disturbing part of this story, because it means the same thing could happen to any company, no matter how big, no matter how dominant, no matter how invincible they seem today. The warning signs are always there. The question is whether anyone has the courage to act on them. Sears dominated America for over a century. They were a household name. They were part of American culture. They employed hundreds of thousands of people. They served hundreds of millions of customers. And now they're basically gone, not because they had to be, but because they chose to be. So here's the question I'll leave you with, and I really want you to think about this. Which company that seems invincible today is actually the next Sears? Think about it, look at the patterns, look at the symptoms, look at the leadership, look at the decisions being made. Because somewhere, right now, there's a company that seems too big to fail. Employees are comfortable, shareholders are happy, customers are still showing up. But the rot is already spreading, the culture is already broken, the focus is already lost. And 15 years from now, we'll be making a video asking, how did that company go from dominating the world to vanishing into nothing? The answer will be the same as it is for Sears. They had everything they needed to win, except the right leadership, the right culture, and the right focus. So which company is it? Drop your answer in the comments. Is it Tesla, Meta, Boeing, Netflix, Disney, even Amazon itself? Because if Sears taught us anything, it's this: nobody is too big to fail. Everyone is just one decade of bad decisions away from irrelevance. Remember that the next time someone tells you a company is invincible. Thanks for watching. If this story made you think differently about business, success, and failure, hit that like button. And subscribe, because we're diving deep into more stories like this, the rises and falls that shaped our world. Until next time, remember, today's empire is tomorrow's cautionary tale. The only question is which one.